Hello, PUG South and Southeast Asia cohorts and partners. It's Sarah again, your PUG champion, and I'm excited today. Actually, it's morning now. I'm pre-recording this call because my guest is actually on the other side of the world. I think in his time, it's about in the afternoon, 4 o'clock.
That's true.
And it's so exciting. You probably saw that bit of who he is. He's employee number 6 of HubSpot. And because we're talking about RevOps, I thought it's best to speak to the guy who actually drove the sales energy, the revenue energy of HubSpot from the beginning. Our master lion, our papa lion, Tyre.
Oh, Sarah, I should talk to you more often. You're such a positive person. I know it's only 7 o'clock in the Philippines, but every time I talk with you, I get excited and super pumped to talk a little bit about RevOps and how RevOps is a game changer for companies who are scaling throughout the world.
So Dan, we were both together at Inbound, and at Inbound, I think the main theme that Yamini started us off was this age of the disconnected, because client, consumer, right? And when we're thinking about this theme, how does that relate to how data has a play in how companies actually organize their systems in this age of the disconnected buyer?
All right, so you sent me the best questions that I have seen so far in October. And thank you for doing that in advance. And it makes perfect sense. You can only improve what you can measure. And everybody has these thoughts, oh, I've got to figure this out. I've got to understand. And unless you're got a KPI where you're measuring something, right, there is no way for you to, first of all, understand where you are today. Second of all, understand if you're describing the right problem. Third of all, to measure your improvement. And the way we solve problems, RevOps problems as well as general business problems in 2022, leading in 2023, is you start with the goals and work backwards, right? And so understanding which goals you want, and it's nonsensical to establish goals unless you have data to develop those goals, right? And then ensure that the goals are specific and they're achievable, and you have a way to know when you fulfilled the obligation and you've reached that goal. So data plays a fundamental role in all of those components of making sure that you have the right information so that you can measure and improve the situation with the disconnected buyer.
I love that, Dan. That's so true. Data plays an integral part in actually setting up realistic goals, right? Being able to measure where you're starting from, and then being able to track where you're headed, that goal, that number, that data point that you want to reach. So
I just had this conversation with somebody today. They're like, we want to double customer satisfaction. I'm like, what does that mean? They're like, we want to make sure our customers are delighted. And I'm like, all right, are they delighted today? And they're like, we don't think so. I'm like, well, let's start with understanding where they are today, right? Run a NPS survey and try to understand a data point that will allow us to anchor a foundation of where we are today. And then, right, the other thing, he wanted to double in 90 days. I'm like, that's a little aggressive, even for me. I'm like, my middle name is velocity and acceleration. I'm like, let's calm down a little bit. Let's see, number one, where we're at today. Let's get the data and the facts. Number two, let's have a reasonable uplift to ensure that the programs that you institute have a lasting effect.
All right, that's so great. So guys, in PUG in South and Southeast Asia, RevOps, you need to organize your data. Step 1. So, thinking about also RevOps, it's a big thing. Everyone has been talking about it in the sales space. All sales leaders I know often, churn out this word RevOps, and they know they want to make sure that they have a strategy in place. I wonder though, for most, our side of the world is a little bit behind here because we're in the Philippines. It's a fairly new concept. But how early do you think should companies start thinking and strategizing about RevOps?
It's very interesting because RevOps is a fancy word for scalability. And virtually every company that I've ever met in the Philippines wants to grow. Have you ever met a company that didn't want to grow?
No, not at all. Everyone wants to grow, double up, triple up.
I know, exactly. Philippine nationals are obsessed with growth. In Italy, it's a little different, right? You ask them, do you want to grow? And they go, nah, we got enough customers. But in the Philippines, that scalability is super important. And if you ask people, do you want to scale? Do you want to grow? They always say yes. Therefore, you have to be mindful of the RevOps strategy from the very beginning, right? I tell all of our entrepreneurs, you're working two jobs. Number one, you're making sure you never miss your number today. Number two, you're understanding and laying the foundation for the process so that you can double that, right? Because if you're doing 10x today, you're going to be wanting to do 20x in 2023. Right. And always solving for the next step. And of course, the challenge with that is that what gets you to $1 million in revenue works against you as you go from $1 million to $2 million. And so what HubSpot is trying to do is provide the free and starter products, right? So that right from the very beginning, right, it's a little bit easier for our HubSpot customers to understand the crafted, not cobbled approach, where when you're ready to move to the next step, you just move to the next product level, right? Where you're mindful of all of the systems working together with one code stream, where sales, marketing, service, operations can all work off the same user interface and code base. And it's number one, the right thing to do. Number two, makes it easier to train your employees. Number three, it makes it easier for you to scale. So there's not so many disparate systems. You're not spending all your time trying to pull them together. You're spending all your time looking at the data and be able to articulate how to improve based on what you see.
I love that you said that, Dan, because, right from the beginning, even if you're on a freemium subscription, on the free subscription, you're collecting data. And that data will be the starting point of that RevOps strategy that we spoke about, we're speaking about right now. So
I was just talking to a company today, based in France, 150,000 employees.
Wow.
Right? Their biggest challenge is the ability to get the information that they need at all different levels, right?
Wow.
They've got tens of thousands of salespeople. And, right, they agreed. If we had started RevOps in the very beginning, we wouldn't have gone through all these expensive and hard to implement system changes. Right. And HubSpot is perfectly aligned as the number one scalable CRM for all businesses, right, to address the ultimate challenge where at some point in time, every single company would hit the wall. And if you're using HubSpot, you can scale up without having to go through those potholes.
All right. So PUG South and Southeast Asia, if you didn't pick that up, Dan just actually showed us how to be the best salesperson. He's probably the best guy talking to all these people. When you're in sales, you gotta be talking to clients all the time, every day. Even at night. If you just have conversations to get to know them, because those information that you pick up, learning about their business actually helps you help them. So
you do that very well. You do that very well, Sarah. I've seen you do that. You're always very curious about what we call inhibitors to growth. And I've seen you ask your prospect and customers, all right, what's holding you up? What is the challenge? And the great thing about RevOps, if you're working those two jobs, number one, making sure your data is effective for closing business today, and also planning for when you have twice as much or 10 times as much or 1,000 times, then you're going to be ahead of the game.
That's so true, and we all want to be ahead of the game. So let's talking about helping. What are your tips for companies that are starting to build their RevOps strategy?
Yeah, so it boils down to people, process, and data, right? Data, you can also substitute systems, right? So number one, there's some what we call in the United States low-hanging fruit. You know that phrase? Okay, so there's some obvious things that people are doing that if you can cut out that extra system, which just simplifies everything. For instance, some people are using third-party calendar tools, and with the HubSpot meeting tool, you just substitute that, and it works equally as well. And all of the information automatically goes into the HubSpot CRM, and you have good access to all of that information. So the first thing you're going to do is look at your current system, and when you do a systems audit, It's always very interesting. Lots of times people say, what do you mean we're paying that invoice? We stopped using that application like 2 years ago. And no one ever walked it back through purchasing or accounts receivable to explain, no, that's not an active system anymore. Number two, you have to make sure you have good people. You have to be flexible. They have to be able to see in the future. They have to understand that balance between what needs to take place today and what's going to happen in the future. Right. And then third, you got to look at your data sets, and you got to understand when any of this kind of scale up process works, there's always priorities that you have to make. It's very, very hard to get around to everything. So those omissions, the things that you are not going to do, right, because you're not going to get to them in the next 12 months, is important distinguishing factor and an important part of planning for RevOps. So people, data, systems, and then priorities. Those are the tips that I would give.
So Dan, for the PUG people, we love acronyms. So that's PPDS, people,
Ooh,
right?
Right
People, process,
good job,
data
Sarah.
sets, and systems. So if you have a PhD and an MA, you need PPDS for RevOps. So
I like that. By the way, all that information that I got is just the research I did on RevOps, right, from HubSpot Academy. Mm-hmm. Right. And from the HubSpot website, right? Because RevOps has emerged as one of the most important attributes of scaling companies, right? And so HubSpot and, of course, your partnership stands ready and willing to help anybody, right? Mm-hmm. That needs a little bit of assistance in applying these benchmarks and these processes to achieve that scalability.
So Dan, I'll make sure to give those links for the RevOps pillar page, as well as the RevOps HubSpot Academy course to all the PUG members here in South and Southeast Asia. But, I learned about RevOps from HubSpot maybe a year or two ago when I did a masterclass in RevOps. I was wondering, are you guys going to do that again? Is that in the pipeline? Or maybe you can share some relevant resources other than those two that you would recommend our partners to look at?
Let me go back and I'll send you some links in our Slack channel so I can send you what's most appropriate for your group. We are going to have a RevOps bootcamp taught in English and then in French and Spanish throughout the year, because it's so valuable. Mm-hmm. It's so important. Mm-hmm. It's so new, right? It's only been around for 2 years, right? And HubSpot's leading the charge in helping our partners, our customers, and the world at large understand the competitive advantage of scale.
All right. So I'll make sure to share those resources also to the partners. Dan, thank you so much for your time today. Any closing words, any words of inspiration about RevOps for the cohort?
I think you're super smart to get your arms around it early, right? I think that this is in 2022, moving to 2023, companies grow more quickly than ever before. And the companies that grow the quickest have the least bottlenecks. And the way to have the least bottlenecks is to have a crafted, not cobbled data strategy where you're thinking ahead to accommodate that scalability.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Best wishes to you. And we hope to see you live here in our part of the world sometime soon. I'm sure that's going to happen. See you again. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sarah.